Yeah, hello there, and you're very welcome along to Allianz League's Press Pack, where we discuss all the major stories dominating the GAA world in the last week. Joining me tonight are Colm Keys of the Irish Independent and Fintan O'Toole of the 42.ie. Very welcome along, gents.
Thanks, Damian.
Colm, just to come to you first of all, one story that caught our eye over the last week or so was the rejuvenation of Limerick hurling. And if you track back over the winter time, you know, the bouts of maybe indiscipline that we all saw on social media, those videos, it didn't look like they were in a good place. And coming after a season that maybe flattered to deceive, you wonder where they were going. But just a few weeks into the National League, they're the squad to beat. Can you maybe frame how they've turned the whole thing around so far?
Well, turn it around, Damian, and rejuvenation. When you think back to their season last year, they lost by a point to Kilkenny. That's how close they were to an All-Ireland final, having been imperious in the Munster final. That's the only way you can describe that performance in the Gaelic grounds against Tipperary that day. They crushed them. So everything except that first quarter against Kilkenny was really in order. And I mean, they won the league almost at a canter. But it's in the off-season when these stories started to develop that certain question marks came over them. And remember, after 2018, everybody said, look, how well Limerick had carried themselves and held themselves. But it became quite apparent that there were certain chinks there over the close season. So there was inevitably new focus on them. But the one way that you deal with that is with the power of your performance. And certainly over the last three halves, if you take out the first half, we certainly would be talking about all those incidents a lot more, only for the recovery against Tipperary and the power and drive of that performance against Galway last weekend. It's amazing how quickly you can forget about these things and how you look ahead to the games, and it provided focus, and they really had to win back, I suppose, all the respect that they gained off the Limerick public in 2018, and I think they've done that, and I think it's very much in the rear view mirror now.
That's a good point you make. Fintan, we saw a picture of the Limerick squad signing autographs for kids after the game. Do you think that's maybe a kind of a move to reconnect with the public again? As Colm said, when they won the All-Ireland, they behaved impeccably. The pubs were ruled out. The schools instead got the Lee McCarthy Cup. And then it just unravelled a little bit. Do you think that maybe they're outwardly trying to connect with the public again?
Yeah, I think they've looked like a side that are really, really focused from the very start of the season. I mean, the point you make about kind of that, I suppose, that kind of line of players and the autograph hunters underneath the Mackey stand. We saw that last Sunday. It was the same when they won the Munster League final back in January, the pre-season. I was down to that game, and like there were still players still there till half an hour after throwing, after the full-time whistle. So they looked, really, really focused. I think the other thing is the strength and depth of the side. I mean, that hasn't changed. I mean, they won the 15 under 21, they won the 17 under 21, and certain guys stepped up straight away, the likes of Cian Lynch and that. But to me, it's the kind of layer of players underneath that are really kind of pushing to make a case now.
Like who, Fintan?
Like David Reedy, I suppose, is taking over the free taking. David Dempsey's been really, really good. He got the goal last Sunday. Say even someone like Darragh O'Donovan, who started in 2018, then William O'Donoghue comes in last year. He was the man of the match last Sunday, then Darragh O'Donovan when he plays. So suddenly, like, you've three really strong midfielders going for two positions. And, I mean, they've had 5 or 6 big injuries so far in the league, but I think right now they're the strongest.
Just going back to what happened over the course of the off-season, I thought John Kiley dealt with it very well. He acknowledged things that happened, put it out there that they had been dealt with, and we can see how they have been dealt with in terms of personnel, perhaps, and they have moved on quickly. And I think, looking at the performance last weekend, especially in the Gaelic grounds, you look at Seamus Flanagan, who's
back in form.
He's rejuvenated from 2018. He was such a pivotal figure for them in the All-Ireland quarter-final against Kilkenny, if you remember his runs to the side and his creation, and he set up that goal brilliantly last weekend, and some of his passing, just some of his ball winning. So he looks a really renewed figure, and I thought Graham Mulcahy was one of the elder statesmen within the team. Thought he was superb last weekend. A lot is really auguring well for them again, and that performance against Galway was mindful. If they went down to Nolan Park last year and beat Kilkenny, almost routed them, and at that stage you would think, this is a one-team season with Limerick, and while they haven't, they're not at that stage and maybe won't get to that stage. I think I'd agree with Fintan, the way they're managing their players, it's almost as if they have a core of a team, And on each line, they'll introduce one player for every game, and it's almost by rotation that they are being able to introduce players, give them a platform to be able to compete and to thrive without having huge responsibility, because they have two of the more established players on a line beside them. So someone like Barry Nash can come into half-back, and he knows that he has either Declan Hannon or Diarmuid Burns, or it was Dan Morrissey last weekend, so he can thrive in that number 7 position. So really good recruitment, good rotation system underway with Limerick, and two good
right
results.
now, Fintan, he's used 32 players in 2 games. As Colm alluded to, most of those players feel they've got a shot at making that team now, including David Reedy, who was playing Christy Ring Cup with Kildare just 2 to 3 years ago. Isn't that the sign of great management on Kylie's behalf?
Yeah, and I think as well one thing that's probably helped them a little bit is this change to the All-Ireland Club Championship, because I mean, between the Pearshing and Kilmallock over the last 5 or 6 years, I suppose Limerick have been without kind of some of their frontline players for a lot of the springs, but like I suppose the Limerick champions kind of went out in Munster a bit earlier, so everyone's been on it and everyone's been committed to the county scene since December. If there was one maybe, I suppose, slight issue, and it's kind of maybe touching back as well to last year's All-Ireland semi-final, that slow start, their shooting was quite poor early on in that game, and like last Sunday, they won it by 8 points in the end, but it kind of took them a while to really kind of confirm that superiority. I mean, they won, the white count was 15-5 in their favour. I
suppose Aaron Gallan he's one of their main marksmen. He was off the field for most of it. Cian Lynch didn't play in it, so you know they wouldn't have been at full strength either. But I think there's no doubt that they are the strongest squad in the game at present. Now Tipperary will obviously, with the onset of all their under 20 and 21 players from the last 2 years, like they will develop an even stronger squad.
And I suppose, guys, when you're looking to try and strengthen lines again, every little inch helps. And Caroline Curd is back. They rate her very, very highly down there. Donal O'Grady, the former captain, is back, and he's from Kelty Challenge teams all the way through. He's a good, steady hand, a young emerging coach. Does that help the mix?
Well, I think it's probably good rather than kind of maybe listening to the same voices, and you know, Kylie's good at that, isn't he? Kind of, you know, freshening it up. I mean, they've done 3 seasons. They've obviously had the brilliant one, the kind of breakout one in the middle when they won the All-Ireland. He obviously in the off-season maybe decided to change it up a bit. You know, we heard a lot about Caroline Curd in 2018, how she kind of helped players in different ways. She's a brilliant track record with various teams. And then Donal O'Grady would be a guy that's very, very much respected. There'd be a good core of that team still would have played with him when he was captain for them in 2013 when they won Munster. Okay. You know, really well-liked guy within the county, and I think he has that respect.
There's a sense that, like a lot of teams that win one, that they, you know, to chase hard after a second one. The second one really caps a great team, a second All-Ireland title. I think that's what Limerick were in pursuit of last year, until Kilkenny caught them, but I think they're really locked on. They look locked on. I know it's only very early February, but the 2 teams that they have beaten and the manner in which they have done it suggests that they are really locked on.
They have the strongest squad in Ireland at the moment. Would that be correct to say? And that might prevent their form lines from dipping a bit, because it still is only February. But by the time it gets to the end of the league, they'll have maybe 15 guys who aren't on the first team that'll be pushing hard to keep the levels up.
Well, if you take 2018 in the 7, if you remove the Carlow game that they played in the preliminary quarter-final, they started 16 players in the 7 games. That's how narrow it was at that time. That's probably stretched now. There are 20 to 22 probably potential starters for Limerick now, including Nash, Flanagan, Peter Casey when he gets back, all of those guys. Maybe Aaron Costello, who has been coming into it at cornerback. So players like that, they're all putting their hands up. So they're, you know, the spread is wider. The spread of potential starters is wider, and that's a good thing for Limerick, and I think that's been developing over the last 2 league campaigns.
Final thing then on Limerick, Fintan. Is there anything they should look out for? I mean, in terms of it's very, very promising, very, very early. What are the potential pitfalls that lies await maybe for that squad?
Well, I suppose they only have to look back to last year, and look, I suppose it's been something that's been talked about a lot, how teams who win the Munster Championship manage that gap till the All-Ireland semi-final. And like they came with a big late charge against Kilkenny that day, you know, like Shane Dowling scored a terrific goal. They probably should have got a 65 at the end to have a chance to level it, but ultimately they were just that bit flat in the first 15 minutes. Kilkenny were on it straight away, and that cost them.
Probably dazed by that Kilkenny rush that so many teams have been caught by in the past. If you remember, very similar to the 2006 All-Ireland final with Cork, if you recall that, that Cork were going for 3 in a row and they just met a Kilkenny team that were ravenous.
And of course the lines are pretty fine in hurling, and potentially a black card or a sin bin could change the whole dynamic of a team. And again, it's part of the news we've seen over the last week or so, that the potential sin bin coming in for hurling And just to frame that, I mean, what it involves basically is you get a black card for one of 4 cynical fouls, deliberately pulling down an opponent, deliberately tripping an opponent with a hand, arm, leg, foot or hurley, colliding with an opponent after he's played the ball, and then remonstrating aggressively with a match official. They're the key points. Player gets 10 minutes in the sin bin as a punishment. And as we've seen it in Gaelic football, it's been, I suppose, slow in its implementation, Colm. Would it work in hurling, and would you be for it?
In principle, Damian, I would be for it. Hurling and football may be different games, but they are, run by the same organisation, and they loosely adhere to the same principles of fairness in terms of collisions and tackles and all of that. And I don't see why a hand trip is any different in a Gaelic football game than it is in hurling. But I think for a long time, hurling has felt that, we are above that. The game doesn't need it. The game is fine. And the game is fine. The game is going very well. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't police cynicism all that tighter. Will it be a black card? We don't really know, is a black card the suitable punishment for 10 minutes in for hurling. I think it would probably need to be road tested in a league or something like that. Plenty of road testing in football to see what worked, and eventually, and it looks like, preliminary, very early, that the sin bin 10 minutes is working very well. If you were down in Tralee last weekend and see how Kerry clawed their way back with a man off, Galway player off, Killian McDade, they got 1-1. So it seems to be working in areas like that. But you would have to see it. Obviously the capacity to score from long distance in hurling is different than it is in football. The window for a trial is gone now because it's not a trial year. Last year was the trial year for experimenting. So it seems a little bit quick to be putting a sin bin motion on the floor for Congress without really road testing it, and that's the concern I'd have, that it would maybe fall down on that basis.
Well, I think that's the big issue. I mean, if it was to be brought in for this year, you take the league ends at the end of March, teams have about 5-6 weeks maybe to prepare for the start of the round robin championships. That's a very, very short window for maybe teams to adjust. And the other thing I think is, say we've seen in football, I suppose the amount of the scores teams can put on the board when they have that extra man. You'd imagine the capacity in hurling, especially with the way scoring rates have just shot up in the last few years. Guys in half-back are so prolific.
You would like to see
now
how it actually works in reality. In principle, I do think there will be some measure to deal with cynicism in hurling, and there is nobody that can say that it isn't prevalent in the game. It most certainly is.
We were looking
and
at
I actually think that committee that are overseeing all of this have looked at statistics to say that it is actually more prevalent in hurling now than it is in football.
Well, we might see an example in just a moment or two. Tipperary versus Cork. It was a wide open game. A Tipperary defender took down Robbie O'Flynn. You'll see it here now, and the referee looks at that straight away. That's a black card every day, isn't it, Fintan? But if you look closer,
I think it is, and I suppose the background to that incident was that it came from a turnover that Cork had on the 20-yard line after Tip had done a short puck out. So I say the referee's in midfield, he sees this breakdown, suddenly there's a Cork player go through and he goes to the ground. I would think he was probably going to view that as a black card offence. But the other thing I think the issue is that I think this is going to meet a lot of resistance from people within hurling. It was brought up to John Kiley last Sunday and he was fairly straight down the line. And rightly or wrongly, I think it will be viewed as something that's been kind of foisted on hurling because it's a Gaelic football problem.
I just don't understand how it can be treated any differently, how one set of fouls and one set of consequently rules can apply to one of the sports and it doesn't apply to the other. I just don't think that can continue. Okay,
it'd be interesting to see whether it comes in or not and what form it takes as well. Great stuff, lads. Coming up in just a few moments now, we'll be talking about the Football League and the evolution of defending in the game. See you then. Back to PressPack. Now, we're just chatting off air about the advent and, I suppose, spectacular advent of all the forwards that are coming through and shooting 4 or 5 points per game. But Colm Keys from the Irish Independent, you were reckoning then that maybe the quality of defenders isn't as, I suppose, outrageous as the quality of forwards that we're seeing in the modern game at the moment.
Yeah, if you go back to last year's All-Ireland final replay, I think it is probably unprecedented to say 5 different players each scored 4 points from play. 3 from Dublin and two from Kerry. Now that's a phenomenal return. And obviously, as I said, it's weighted towards the superiority of attacks. But I just wonder about the quality of man-marking defender. A lot of them are very good on the front foot. But the actual quality of man-marking defender, someone that really concentrates on the man rather than the ball. And what it really leads to is how defending has changed and how the collective is everything now in defence. And when defenders are left in one-on-one situations, they're in trouble. I mean, one of the great duels that I recall from the last decade, and one of the great moments of the last decade, was when James O'Donoghue and Keith Higgins went head-to-head in the Gaelic grounds in the replay in 2014, and it was a phenomenal duel. James O'Donoghue scored 2-6 that day, fouled for the 2 penalties he scored, 4 points from play, and yet Keith Higgins emerged with so much credit for how he handled them. And yet Higgins is probably better known for going on the front foot. So many defenders are known for going on the front foot, and that's their strength, rather than being good in reverse. Now, it struck me in Kerry last Saturday night, in Tralee last Saturday night. I don't want to be too hard on the Kerry defence, but they were opened up for 6 clear goal chances by the Galway attack. Now, I'm thinking maybe Kerry are the second best team in the game at the moment, by virtue of pushing Dublin so close last year, and they are their strongest contenders, and yet here they were opened up so much. It shows a certain attitude to attack, but I think their ability to lock down the defence is not there, and I just have question marks over the Kerry defence and defending in general, because even if you were to say that the least cover in the Dublin team is probably in the full back line.
Yeah. So do you reckon then, Fintan, that the likes of an Anthony Lynch from your own county, or a dying breed, a Thomas Sullivan from Kerry, an out-and-out man marker, rarely seen foraying up the field, which a coach now demands, is the old-fashioned defender a thing of the past in this current game?
I think it's probably changed a bit over the last decade. I mean, if you look at maybe a couple of the better ones still there, Michael Fitzsimons at Dublin probably stands out. I think it was probably one of Mayo's strengths, and one of the reasons they're able to go toe-to-toe with Dublin so much. And Mayo's players talked about this, that they felt they could push up rather than inviting Dublin on them, because they trusted the guys that they had behind them. But I guess, I mean, if you look at Donegal's All-Ireland win in 2012 and how successful that was, the different system that Jim McGuinness employed, like every All-Ireland winner, you see teams trying to imitate them. And I suppose there is a kind of a sense now that defending is maybe a bit more collective than individual. And you get bodies back, but I suppose it's a question. You see this with different teams. What are actually those bodies doing? Are they just covering space? So, teams just maybe don't let the one-on-one situations develop anymore. I mean, how many teams will play a 3, like the traditional 3 in the full forward line this year? Very
few. I go back to someone like Carl Lacey before he was converted to centre back, and he took on attackers like Michael Meehan and Paddy Bradley one of the years, and almost held them scoreless on the Donegal run to an All-Ireland quarter-final, with just brilliant man-to-man defence. And it's just an aspect of the game that's not there and has moved on, because, as Fintan said, there is a collective element to it here, and so many great defenders are good on the front foot. Look at Jack McCaffrey and where he can take the ball and what pace. And we were talking outside earlier about Jack being, celebrating the fact that late on in the 2018 All-Ireland final, he turned over Matty Donnelly in possession late on in that game, and he said it was one of his finest moments in the game or in the year, and he had so many fine moments, but he was really, really proud of that one, and it stood out for him. So that just shows you that a turnover is really cherished by some of these players, but there's so little of it. There is so little of it, individual defending now.
Do coaches demand the Lee Keegan 2016 prototype, for example? Do they demand that you fill the space, you turn over a ball and you get on your bike straight away, and that there's no room for a player just to sit back anymore, and if he does sit back, somebody else goes the next time?
Well, I suppose as well it comes back to, kind of what you're getting at, that having a scoring option from that kind of defence. I mean, like Colin mentions the Jack McCaffrey incident. He was kind of keen, I remember that time, to kind of say, look, I'm not just about scoring. I know then he scored, was a 1-3 in last year's drawn All-Ireland final, and that's what he was kind of mainly recognised for in that game. But, you think of someone like Patrick Durkin for Mayo, the quality of the points that he kicks from distance. So I guess that's just the way the game has changed, that if you're a team now and you have a wing back, your wing backs need to be comfortable if they get a chance from 45 yards out and they've come forward to be able to put it over the bar.
Yeah. Like you mentioned, Mick Fitzsimons he's a tidy man marker now too, and Johnny Cooper has been the go-to man marker for Dublin, but he experienced such difficulties with David Clifford, obviously, in last year's drawn All-Ireland final, got red carded with 3 fouls, and he's really, really good defender, but probably better out at centre back, or he's probably better out there. So there's an absence of lockdown defenders in the game at the moment. That's the point I would make, and it derives from that game, which was fantastic game in Tralee, and we saw a new attacking focus on attack from the Galway team, and obviously led by Shane Walsh. And Damian Comer was back to start his first match in 18 months since the 2018 All-Ireland final. So there's a lot going on with Galway too, and they were unlucky to lose now.
We could lose that style of defending as time moves on. The old-fashioned ways is eking out a bit, but it's an intriguing league so far, guys. But Division 2, Fintan, has really caught my eye because so much at stake. Will you just maybe frame it for our viewers? Who has what to lose in this division, and look at how it's shaping out so far?
Well, I suppose over the last couple of years the importance of the league has kind of grown, but I think it's never more so this year that, you know, the two sides relegated from Division 2, basically unless they reach their provincial final, they won't be in the race for Sam Maguire this year.
And they go into?
They go into the Tier 2 Championship. And then conversely then the Division 3, there's a huge amount at stake for those teams in terms of getting promoted, and already, I mean, it's the third round of fixtures this weekend. You know, there's some big potential promotion games at Division 3, and then the Division 2 table looks so congested. I mean, Roscommon probably would have been most people's favourites to go up. Now, they're only
There's only 2 points separating the 8 teams after 2 rounds. Now, you mightn't say, well, there's not a lot in that, but you'd always expect some team to win 2 games and other teams to lose 2, but it hasn't happened so far. And I think Armagh's reversal to Laois after what they did against Cavan the week before.
Can you explain that?
Was just that. Can't accept that they're just a hugely inconsistent team, capable of great highs, but also a lot of lows. And that's it. I just can't. They have a poor record against Laois, but that shouldn't really mean anything. So a little bit baffled by Armagh not following on from that performance.
Because 2 weeks ago I was writing up their chances with you in my company of them making the Super 8s, and I was fairly convinced about the style of football.
I'd still be confident that they will progress this season, but they have those blips and they can really go back against themselves. And yet Cavan, having lost so heavily to Armagh, go and win a home game against Westmeath. So it's all over the place. And for Kildare to go down and lose to Clare, a Clare team that's missing some of their key players, and we know that, but they're very, very resilient, and they eked out a 1-point win there, albeit Kildare had a lot of indiscipline. They had a black card and a red card, and it probably upset them a little bit, but a great win for Clare, really great win.
Kildare will need it. Sorry,
Fintan. The flip side then as well, though, I suppose to kind of show how kind of tightly congested the division. I mean, 2 years ago, Laois were playing Division 4 football, and they got back-to-back promotions under John Sugu. They have a new manager in here. I mean, they looked gone in the Roscommon game. They got 2 late goals, got a point, got a draw. They get a bounce, then they're playing at home the following Saturday night, and they have a brilliant win, and now they're suddenly top of the table.
Your native county, well, your own county, Cork, they're going to be pushing very, very hard for promotion as well. I would imagine they'll be a clear runner in Division 3.
Yeah, well, I think this fixture is interesting on Sunday. It tells a lot. I mean, a decade ago, Cork and Down contested the All-Ireland Senior Final, and now they're playing a Division 3 match against each other on Sunday.
A slip from either of them, and they'll scarcely be competing in an All-Ireland.
And even you see the celebrations series of the Down players on the pitch last Saturday night when they beat Derry. I mean, they'd drawn with Tipperary the week before. Like, the players know well what's at stake here. They know what they're playing for and what's the prizes for the summer, because, you know, it's going to be very difficult for Down to make an Ulster final. Cork are down on the same side to play Kerry in a Munster semi-final. So there's a lot riding on
in
this
2011, Kildare were in the business end of the season as well. Jack will probably be a little bit worried, Colin, will he? I mean, in terms of losing to Clare last weekend.
Struggled over Fermanagh Damien at home initially, and then to lose to Clare, and now this weekend it's Armagh, and that's a huge fixture in terms of the overall promotion race. I think one or the other, whoever loses that, and will then be, 2 defeats, it'll be very, very hard to make up the ground from then on, especially with Roscommon later on, maybe getting a few players back and getting stronger. I think it's going to be difficult for either Kildare or Armagh to lose another game.
Intriguing. That half an hour flew. Thanks so much for the chat, lads. Now, there's plenty more live Allianz League action on Air Sport this weekend. You can join us on Air Sport 1 on Saturday as the aforementioned Kildare travel to Armagh to take on Kieran McGeeney's men in a Division 2 clash. We're all looking forward to that. It's on air from 6:30 p.m. Meanwhile, across the way on Air Sport 2, Desi Farrell's Dublin welcome Monaghan to GAA headquarters, and that one is also on air from 6:30 p.m. But for now, my thanks to Colm and Fintan for their insight tonight. PressPack will be back at the same time next week to discuss all the latest happenings in the world of the GAA. Good night until then.